It's 6:32, and I'm gonna call the Newport City Council meeting to order for Monday, November 2nd, 2020 at 6:32 p.m. All members of the council I see are present in the remote meeting. Others located in the council room include our city manager, Laura Dogan, city clerk treasurer, Jim Johnson, our fire chief, John Hallamert, and Public Works Director, Tom Bernier. Item number 2 is to approve the minutes of October 19th, 2020.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Wilson makes a move to approve the minutes of 19 October 2020.
Motion made by Mr. Wilson. Is there a second?
Dan Ross, I'll second.
Made by Mr. Wilson, seconded by Mr. Ross. Discussion on the minutes. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. The next item is comments by members of the public. Okay, we will move on. Item number 4 is the MWA grant closeout for Marina project and presentation, plus a letter of support, and I will turn it over to the city manager at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a project that has been very fulfilling to watch it unfold. I want to recognize some of the MWA. It might be a good idea if anybody who's not muted could please mute their phone so that we don't get that reverberation. Thank you, that sounds better. I wanted to recognize the people on this call participating in this meeting who have been integral in this project. Certainly Mary Pat Goulding from MWA, Jennifer Hopkins from MWA. I see treasurer is on MWA. I'm guessing that might be connected to Jennifer, possibly Dave Converse, who's MWA's current president. I see Ben Copens is on the call, Mission Critical. Thank you, Ben, for participating tonight. And I want to make sure I haven't left any other MWA member off, and it looks like I've gotten everybody. So this is a project that commenced in 2017, and you'll see by the letter that the city authorized in 2017 that that particular portion of the project has been complete. Tonight we have on the phone MWA's consultant, Andres Torrizio, who's going to present the body of that work. At the end of the report, the question will be requested of the city council members to move to continue with our collegial working relationship and write a second letter of support that will work towards implementation of the design. And with that, I'm going to introduce Andres Torrizio. And Andres, the mayor is going to share. You're going to turn the screen over to him so he can pull up his PowerPoint, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I just am going to make Andres a presenter, so he should be able to share his screen.
Thanks very much. Can you? Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Okay. All right, can we see the screen here?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, well, I have just a few slides to show here, and I just wanted to kind of highlight this project that we've now concluded here with MWA and the city. So this was a project that we started back in 2017, and it was a project to improve the stormwater drainage, which ultimately drains to the Newport Marina. And this project actually came about in 2017 when we developed the Memphremagog Stormwater Master Plan. And so Watershed Consulting was hired by the MWA to develop this basin-wide plan. And as a part of that plan, we looked at a lot of different stormwater improvement projects And the goal was really to address both phosphorus and sediment discharges to Lake Memphremagog. And as a part of that project, we did a really detailed priority ranking analysis of all the different projects and quantified the benefit of all those projects. And one of the projects that came right up to the top was here in red, which is called Numia. And so that was the old Numia facility right on the lake where there's an existing stormwater outfall. So that project was ranked initially high in the master plan. And so as a part of our work that we did with NWA after the master plan was to take a more of an in-depth look at that drainage area, which ultimately goes to the lake. And so if you look on this graphic here, the Numia facility is right down where it says number 9, which is at the bottom of the whole watershed. And you can see there's a large land area which drains down to that point. And we looked at a number of different potential stormwater improvement projects within that drainage area. And those are indicated by these numbers. And ultimately what we did was we took a really close look at all those projects, and we really put a fine point on, how much phosphorus and how much sediment can we actually remove by doing all these projects. And ultimately what we found with this more detailed analysis is that this Numia medical site was number 1 in our ranking. So, we through all the quantified metrics, that was really the top project. And so what we ended up doing was completing an in-depth design for the Numia facility. So what's shown on this site plan is the old Numia facility at 84 Farron Street here. And this is the parking lot. And essentially what we're proposing to do is we're proposing to divert the water, which currently drains underneath the building and out to the marina. And we're going to be diverting that water by means of a new pipe over to a constructed gravel wetland treatment system, and then directly to the lake, treated water. So essentially, we're going to be eliminating the issue that the marina has been facing for years in terms of the amount of sediment accumulation in the bay and the need to dredge. And we're going to be trapping that sediment within a series of catch basins and then treating the water in a constructed wetland before discharging to the bay. And so the project is estimated at about $333,000, almost $334,000. And we calculated that the project will remove about 20 pounds of phosphorus a year. And so what that translates into is the $16,859 of for every pound of phosphorus removed, which may not sound very good, but it's actually an incredibly efficient project. The state measures, a project, how efficient a project is on this metric, and you can be getting up into like the $70,000 or $80,000 per pound of phosphorus. So it's a good value for the amount of money spent. And so we went through a permitting analysis, and essentially the permitting looks really good. There's no Act 250 permit amendment required. There's no lakeshore permit required. No floodplain, state wetlands. Also the Army Corps of Engineers. Erosion control, which is the construction general permit. Operational stormwater. So the only thing really that's required to build this project is the local approval through the city. And then just a final slide, and I know it's probably tough to see on your screens, but what we did was we put together an operation and maintenance plan for Tom. And the operation and maintenance plan just outlines, basically looking in these catch basins periodically, removing sediment, and then also looking in the wetland, making sure that the plant material in there doesn't die. If it's replaced periodically, if it did die, replaced periodically. And then, that's essentially it. So it should be a relatively low maintenance kind of a system. And so those are that's really the overview, and I don't want to take too much time, but, I'm happy to answer any other questions, if there are any from the council. But that's a summary of the project.
This is Melissa Pedersen with the council.
Yep.
one very simple question. So the sediment that's collected in the area, the catch basin where it gets collected,
Yep.
and then is removed occasionally, where does that go?
Yeah, so that is collected. It would be removed by a Vector truck, and the city owns a Vector truck, and it would be just like you're doing your standard maintenance of the catch basins along the street. And so that material, I believe, is brought to a landfill because it's essentially landfilled material at that point. So it would just be brought, wherever the city now currently dumps their sediment, which I believe would be the landfill.
Okay, thank you.
Dan Ross here. Does the property owner have to give easements and stuff for all the building that we're going to put over there? The sediment area collection and
right.
The utilities.
Right. So I should mention we throughout this whole process we worked really closely with the landowner. So I was in contact with Doug Spates throughout the process, and showed him various versions of the plan. And I think my understanding now is he's fully on board with the project. And so I guess it's kind of up to the city and Doug to determine whether or not there would need to be, what kind of a document would need to be in place in order for the city to basically come on site and, clean the sediment from the catch basins periodically. But, as a part of our project, we did fully have him kind of engaged, through the process. And I think, my understanding is he's on board with it.
Okay, thank you.
This is Paul Manette. Now the catch basin, if I'm looking at the map that you have up on the screen,
yep.
Is that the old community garden area? Because there's not a whole lot of grassy area over there.
Yes, that is exactly right. So this is, if you look at the line right here, this is the edge of the pavement. So, and there's actually the shed, there's two sheds which are shown on here, which are part of the garden. So the community garden area would have to be reoriented to make this work because this part of the footprint of this wetland is within that community garden space.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, Kevin Charbonneau.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there's for the culvert where it drains now going into the lake, it's an open pit basically.
Yes.
I believe the building houses a daycare, and although the area is fenced off for the kids and that pit of death is also fenced off, are there going to be any plans to cover that over or fill it in?
That's a great question. So that pit of death is back here on the other side of the building, on the north side of the building. And we're going to be cutting off the amount of runoff that goes to that point by, a very high amount. Now 95% of the runoff is going to be cut off. But you can see on my drawing right here, there's actually a loading dock which drains to that point, and there's actually a loading dock in the front of the building too, which drains to that point. And we looked at actually trying to eliminate that entirely, and the elevations are so marginal that it would be really hard to bring those those drains, just those local drains, to our new point of discharge. It's not impossible, but it would cost a lot more money to do it. And so in the current design, we actually leave that in place, but it's really just going to now be, a very small amount of area which is going to drain to that point. So it's not going to be a maintenance burden like it was. I mean, it potentially even could be graded or something like that, so you don't have an open pit, because you're not going to need to get to it nearly as much as you do now with the amount of water flow that goes in there.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Dan Ross, one more question. Has any consideration been given to the roof runoff and where it goes?
To the sorry, from the building.
Yes.
So the roof runoff, as far as we understand, the roof runoff also discharges into those drains, and so it's because it's so flat around there, we haven't proposed any other alternative measure for the drains. And we don't know exactly how the drains discharge. We don't have them all in our plan, but we think that they drain into those same two catch basins that drain the loading docks.
Okay.
This is Kevin Charbonneau. The soil around that building is very sandy. I happen to abut the property, so the water from the rain or the roofs, it actually just goes right into the soil quite nicely.
It does. That's good to know. Yep.
Other questions from council members? Laura, did you want to add anything, City Manager?
I forgot to mention how important Tom Bernier has been to this project, and he's been involved since 2017 as well. And I did want to confirm that Tom endorses this project. He is in the room if anybody has any questions. But I also want to thank the council members for asking those questions. I mean, that was fantastic. I have more advancement in my own knowledge about the project as a result of those questions. If no one does have any questions for Tom, I would then ask if the council would entertain signing the letter of support to continue our collaboration and to work with MWA as they seek additional funding for the implementation phase.
Dan Ross here. I move to authorize the city to continue the collaboration and ask the mayor to sign the letter of support for Newport Marine Services Drainage Stormwater Design Grant.
Motion made by Mr. Ross. Is there a second?
This is Melissa. I'll second the motion.
Motion made by Mr. Ross, seconded by Ms. Pedersen. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 The ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you, and thank you, Andreas, for the presentation and the answers to the great questions.
Great.
Looks like it's a great project.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate your time, everybody on the council. Thank you.
Thank you all, council members from MWA.
Thank you, MWA.
Okay, all right, moving on. The next item is the solid waste implementation plan. This is public meeting number 2. Basically, it's just to answer any questions, because at this point, there are no changes to be made. It's basically a template put out by the state of Vermont that we have to fill in, and my understanding is it has been accepted by the state, and it's just a matter of presenting it and answering any questions that council members may have or members of the public. It's required to have 2 public meetings on it, which is different than a hearing. A hearing is where you can accept input to make changes. This is just a meeting where you answer questions regarding the plan, because it's pretty straightforward and it's pretty strict by the state of Vermont. They have very strict guidelines, and the city manager had to make numerous changes before it was accepted. My understanding, she sends a draft down, they come back with questions, she answers them, and it gets implemented into the plan. Now, I know the city manager, I think, said she received one change from the state. I think, if I remember right, I think she said we no longer have to accept asphalt shingles.
That is correct. There was a requirement in the original plan that stated the city was going to have to find a way to recycle asphalt shingles by July 1st, 2021. I received an update since we had our last meeting. The update is dated October 21st, that they've removed that deadline. So that's a big relief for us because we would have just dovetailed onto another entity who was doing it, but it's an indication of sometimes they put out a mandate and it's really hard to follow. So I'm really glad they made that change. The other thing that happened since our last meeting is I got confirmation from the Department of Environmental Conservation that our solid waste implementation report that I file each year has been approved. So that's always a nice relief when you get written confirmation that they've approved our past report. And what you said, Mayor, is absolutely accurate. We are required to hold 2 public meetings. These are meetings. The template was accepted by A&R. After the City Council holds 2 public meetings, I will ask them for a vote to approve this plan. I will then submit it back to A&R with documentation of both meetings so that they'll get a copy of the agendas as well as the minutes. And I need to have this submitted, and the plan has to be approved by November 19th, which is the date that they gave us. The plan is on our website. It can be found in our calendar as well as our website down at the bottom of the home page under recent news. And I'd welcome any questions.
Are there any questions from anyone taking part in the meeting? Are there any questions for the city manager regarding our plan?
I do have a question. This is Teresa Gerard speaking.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I did try to look up the annual report that was filed for last year, and I was able to find the report that was filed, but I'm unable to view any of the attachments. And I did create an account in that retrack system, but it says I'm not authorized to view any of the attachments. I know we can't solve that problem now, but I did want to let you know that I was trying to read that to understand better the plan based on last year's report. The other question that I had was I was on the meeting last month, and I believe the city manager said that Newport's recycle rate was 4% or 4-point-something%. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's part of the retrack report. And the only people that can file on the retrack are either haulers or solid waste managers, and that's why you can't access the retrack, but the report is on our website. So what I'll do is I'll go into our website and make that report more prominent so you can have easier access to it. There's quite a bit of information on our website about recycling. And so I'll pull that to the forefront. So when you look at it tomorrow afternoon, you should find it with ease.
Okay, I did try to navigate through all the documents. But the question I have about the recycle rate, I noticed that the nationwide average for the United States is about 35%, and the state of Vermont's average is about 35%. So 4% seems abnormally low, and I was wondering if there's any effort being taken to increase the recycling that's happening in Newport.
Well, what I can tell you is that we not only have a recycling center, but individual haulers also offer curbside recycling pickup. So if consumers are paying for recycling, they're also paying for a recycling center in their taxes. So on some level, it would be very nice to eliminate one or the other. And I can tell you that the haulers also have to report their data into the retrack systems. And when I generate our data, my data comes from the haulers as well as our larger generators. So the hospital, Columbia Forest Products, the nursing homes, schools, we have, and our larger landowners, everybody provides me their weights of tonnage that they produce in a year towards waste and recycling. And I divide that number by the population here and divide that by the tonnage and the number of days in the year, believe it or not. That's basically the formula that's used to develop the 4%. So it's definitely a work in progress to try to get people to recycle more. As they say, it takes more than just me, and I think your call is very much appreciated, as are your comments, and I'm absolutely tickled that somebody's actually looking at this, so I want to thank you for that.
Okay, I know that I probably recycle 50% of my trash, so I'm astounded at the low figure, but I'm wondering if there's any way to market or advertise, or, I mean, signs, or I know the Parks and Recreation has a little bit on when they have events, but it seems like there would be more that could be done on the city to just promote recycling.
Do I hear a volunteering in your voice?
I'll give it some thought.
Okay. No, I appreciate that with all due respect and sincerity. Your comments are well taken.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did have one other question if there's time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the haulers charging is based on volume or weight. There's a variable rate pricing ordinance. I wasn't aware of this until I read it, and I don't really understand what that means because I just pay a monthly fee to my hauler. So can you explain that a little bit to me?
The ordinance was passed in 2015 and worded directly from the state. That was a requirement of the Act 148 solid waste and the waste municipal planning. And that ordinance basically means that haulers need to update their rates on an annual basis. And it's pretty much it. I don't know who you use for a hauler. Pat Austin is sort of acts as the city's consultant, and he was actively involved in generating that ordinance, and was also been providing assistance to the city as we move forward with our solid waste plan. And I'd be happy to have him present and discuss that ordinance in more detail if you'd like to have that.
Well, my question is pretty simple because I did read the ordinance. I was able to find that. I don't remember where, I guess on the city Google Drive. And I just wonder what I'm supposed to see from my hauler that shows me that it's based on volume or weight, or how that's supposed to work on the hauler and the consumer, you know, me as someone who hires the hauler. I don't know how that presents itself to me.
I would check with your hauler on that, because I know for us, similar to what I bet you experience, we are charged the same rate every week. And I do believe that's part of it. So I would direct that to your hauler, and it's not that I'm trying to sidestep your question. I think that's better left to the haulers.
Well, this is Melissa. The haulers are charged when they bring their recycling to the solid waste district recycling place. They're paid by how much they haul in there. I mean, they have to pay to deliver that, I believe, and they're paid by the weight of what's there that they're dropping off. But they're not fluctuating their price to the consumer that they're picking up from every month according to how much they're hauling off. Is that, I think maybe that's correct?
Beautifully stated, Melissa. Thank you.
That's correct, Melissa. I can tell you that I pay $18 a month, whether I put it out 1 week or 4 weeks. It's a flat rate that I pay per month, he doesn't change it if I only put out for 2 weeks and then skip 2 weeks.
Right.
Then I've put out for 4 weeks in a row, and I was still charged the $18. So I think what they've done is they charge, like you said, they charge the individuals a flat rate, and then they have to pay that variable whatever, I think. It all depends on how much they're taking for recycling and also how much they're taking to the landfill, too.
Okay. Thank you. I think that clarifies everything.
Okay. Other questions on the SWIP plan? Then if there are no other questions, we will need a motion to approve it.
Mr. Mayor, this is Kevin Charbonneau.
Mr. Charbonneau?
I'll make the motion to approve the swipe report.
A motion has been made. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Wilson will second.
Made by Mr. Charbonneau, seconded by Mr. Wilson to accept the SWIP. Any discussion on the motion? The only question I have, Laura, this is only good for 1 year, right? This has to be done every year?
This is good for 5 years.
5 years.
And
Okay, that's what I thought, yeah.
it's good for 5 years, and I have to continue with a retract report on an annual basis.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Any other discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
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 The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, the next item is the audit reassignment and vote. The council received a memo regarding the assignment of the annual audit reassignment of restricted, committed, and non-assigned funds. I'll let Laura go into the explanation.
Great. So as you know, we've been working on our audit since the end of last fiscal year, which was June 30th, and it's quite an involved process. Near the end of each audit, when we start to winnow down where the funds went and how the funds were spent, we come up with what we realize is eligible to be carried over in some way, either through restricted, committed, assigned, or unassigned. This particular year, our auditors, let's say, went deep and looked at some of the funds that have been dormant in our restricted page, and we came up with some ideas which they endorsed. I had provided a memo as well as the colorful chart. These have been posted on our website, so folks from the public have had a chance to review this and take a look at what the definitions of restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned are, because it's critical in how we then design our budget going forward. I want to just spend a moment talking about that. Restricted are funds that are for a set purpose, generally because of the funder. Committed are amounts that only can be used for specific purposes determined by a formal action by the City Council. Assigned are amounts that are designated by the City Council for a particular purpose, and then unassigned are amounts that are not included in other classifications. Sometimes in slang they're referred to as what might be emergency funds or a rainy day fund. Out of this particular budget, funds that are qualified to be assigned or restricted or committed are in the following areas. We've had the Coventry Street funding in that line item for a number of years now, and the way that it's currently entitled makes it unusable. Our auditor has endorsed two goals for what we're recommending. One is to make the titles of the line items more flexible and usable so that we can use those titles for the longer term, and to move the Coventry Street funds into something that can actually be expended in the capital budget so that it's no longer dormant. So In a way to meet both of those goals, we've come up with a term of street capital design projects. And we would request that the City Council see fit to move the Coventry Street funds into the street capital design projects now so that they can be used towards major infrastructure. As an example, we would be able to use them for the Waterfront Mall intersection project, which, as you know, is a big ticket item, and it's on our radar to begin within the next year. The Coventry Street project in and of itself still needs to be done. It still needs to be completed, and we anticipate that that's going to be a multi-million-dollar project, frankly. So having the $87,000 just being dormant at this time is not going to make a dent in the Coventry Street project. Our Public Works Director is moving the Coventry Street project more towards the front burner. He's seeing very clearly that it's still part of the downtown designation, and that with the pick and shovel expanding and having the level of traffic that it needs, it's really becoming time to start making a concerted effort to do the Coventry Street improvements the same way we're taking on the waterfront mall project, so that same level of priority and attention. So that's one aspect that we're recommending and requesting the council see fit to do. The next one is smaller but has an impact on our design, which, as you know, is very important to members of the community. This ties into the enthusiasm folks have for the landscaping, which is to rename Main Street banners into something that makes it more usable throughout the city. Right now, the title Main Street banners gives a connotation that we're constricted to using that just for the Main Street area. What we'd like to do is rename it to street banners and lights so that we have more flexibility and use it for additional places. And as you know, once the waterfront mall intersection becomes more safe for pedestrians, we're going to be improving the lighting and trying to tie that area so that it looks more integrated with our Main Street. So that will be of great assistance, and we can put some banners up along that street as well as East Main Street. Another one that ties into street capital design is the Vista Lights. Calling that Vista Lights again constricts the title, gives the connotation that it can be only used for the traffic lights on in front of Vista or that area of the causeway. As you know, the waterfront mall intersection, which again you're going to hear me say it a lot because it's such a prominent project on our radar for the next year, has more that we can do with it by renaming it to Street Capital Design Projects. Once that project is complete, there'll be other projects that will fit that title, so that title to be used for the long term. Another new restricted title proposed this year is Streetscape and Park Improvements. I want to linger on that for a moment because that came directly from the Waterfront and Downtown Master Plan. And as you know, that's sort of our guiding light that's carrying us through into the projects that we've taken on in our grant funding. We have received a $50,000 donation from a private entity. And that, much like the electronic marquee that was gifted to us in 2018, we have the same leeway to use those funds. It's our recommendation that we use those funds for approximately $15,000 dedicated to field improvements at Gardner Park, and the remainder would be used to support the parklet that's destined to be created through the Downtown Transportation Grant, which is going to be starting in the spring or summer of 2021. Those funds have been set aside, and part of that project, not only for the intersection improvement, there'll be rapid flashing beacons, the lighting on Field Ave will be improved, but if you recall, the front 4 parking spaces are going to be subsumed into a parklet area. The design of that is to encourage people to look and head down to the waterfront. So that's another once-in-a-lifetime donation that we can put to good use that will be set for the long term. We have some excitement about that. So we'd like to see the council make that permanent. And then the other aspect that we're pleased with is the unassigned funding. We ended up with $250,314.44. Our auditors have been teaching us that having between 10 and 15% of your total capital is a nice unassigned cushion to have. So we're pleased that we ended up this particular budget year with that amount unspent, and those funds are what would be unassigned. In slang terms, the rainy day fund or the emergency fund, so that you have that cushion to bring you forward and can be spent at council's prerogative to assign those funds. If you look at the sheet that's in color, what you'll notice is where we are right now is in the column entitled 6/30/19 balances. That's the first column. You'll note that the title of this sheet says proposed, requesting council approval at the November 2nd, 2020 meeting. The next column will tell you what funds have been added, and the column entitled FY 1920 tells you what funds have been used. The last column on the right entitled 6/30/20 balances, that column represents what we're requesting council approve tonight. So you'll see there's notes that indicate where we've put funds, and you'll see that in purple, or a lighter color, is the new titles that we're requesting council adopt, so we have more usability going forward.
Questions? Laura, I have questions. Back to the let's see, where was it? The previous page. The 250,314. That you would keep as unassigned. So my thought process is, if all of a sudden during this current fiscal year, with the unknowns of COVID, and if there's a shortfall, this could be used to make up a shortfall, correct? If we had an issue or some crisis in the budget or something related to, say, COVID or some other issue.
The way we've termed that is if we had unexpected travesty. So say you had a really bad storm. Say we had a Hurricane Irene up here, and there were unexpected events that happened and you needed emergency funds to be able to manage that. Yes. In terms of COVID, you raise some good points, and right now we've been actively engaged in applying for the LGER funds, and those are funds that reimburse the municipality for expenses that were directly related to COVID. So we're exploring some of those. We also have applied for funds with FEMA. We had less luck with FEMA, and we're still waiting to hear back from the LGER funds, which are the state funds that go to municipalities. So I would say the 250 would be geared more towards infrastructure emergencies as a result of a storm, something unexpected, and hopefully we won't need that. But if at the time we were dealing with an emergency, we'd probably call an emergency meeting and make some pretty significant decisions then. So I hope that's probably a convoluted answer, but once you mention COVID, there's other resources that are available to the city for that specific purpose. Let's put it that way.
Nope, that's perfect. That's what I was looking for. Questions from council members?
Dan Ross here.
Go ahead.
I want to go back quite a ways, all right? And I want to talk about the Coventry Street money. If you remember correctly, the last time that came up, I voted against transferring it anywhere. And I will vote no again because it's pretty obvious to me that 1 and 3 are tied together. And before, we had a number, I forgot what it was exactly. I'd have to get back through my notes of how much the Causeway project would cost, including East Main, including the waterfront reconfiguration and stuff. And at the time, the engineering number had not come in. And I still haven't seen a final engineering number on what that was going to cost. So my thing is, I do not want to take the Coventry Street money and dump it into the Causeway project to overcome a shortage. If we have a bid, if we have an amount that's supposed to go into that project, that's the amount that should go into it. And if it can't be met with what we've told that it should cost, I don't want to throw more money at it. So I guess, for me, you've got to say exactly where the Coventry Street money's going. And if it's going into the Causeway project, for me, it's a definite no.
Well, I guess I look at it that we've been sitting on this $87,000 for 15, 20 years, at least. And if it can be used, and maybe not the Causeway project, but other projects, we ought to use it, because it's a drop in the bucket compared to what it's going to cost to actually fix that street. And so, would it be better if it was designated for something? I mean,
if you wanted to designate it for something specific, I'd be happy to transfer it. But just to arbitrarily say we're going to throw it into this fund and we can use it anywhere. And I'd still like to have a real number on the Causeway project. I mean, we had an estimated engineering, and we were going to get the final engineering number, and we've never seen that. And the only reason I brought this up, because that's where you wanted to put the money last time.
I'm going to invite Tom to present, and I can see that Becky also. Line 18. So let me just direct to line 18. In the meantime, while I'm looking at this, I'll have Tom come.
Evening, everybody. Mr. Ross, that's a great question. We are actually right in the midst of the engineering for the Causeway. It has not been finalized yet. We're currently working with the railroad to figure out what we need to do with the Vista intersection as far as aligning it. And there's going to be a cost with that. Any change to the tracks or that entrance would be on the city's dime. Yeah. I've kind of said all along from the original Stantec design or their report that they gave us, I felt their numbers were low. And they were basically really just talking about the Vista traffic light itself. The overall project, that we're looking at, it takes into the intersection, plus East Main Street. Also looking at possibly making a third lane at Union Street so that when the school's getting out, people stop to turn to go up the hill, they won't be stopping that traffic. This project's going to be quite a bit bigger than we really had anticipated. Our thoughts are, the way we're thinking with that money in Coventry Street, and don't get me wrong, I think that's a great project, but again, like Mr. Mayor said, the $87,000 is not going to go very far with Coventry Street. And if we put it into this fund that we talked about, it's a capital fund. It's only for capital projects. We may not need it all, but I'd hate to start that project and realize that, hey, we're going to be shortfall of $100,000, $200,000 because we just didn't budget enough. And it's hard to say when you start a project like that what you're going to run into. This gives us a little bit more leeway to make that project happen. So.
Well, I understand that. But the third lane, that's not me. The third lane is an addition to what the initial contract was, the initial engineering bid was about, right? That third lane was not involved in the initial
You're right. That's something that I've had in the back of my mind for quite some time. That would help get the flow of traffic to move much better when schools getting out, or Columbia Forest Products, or an event at the high school. You've seen times that you get stuck there because somebody wants to turn left and nobody moves. We've looked at it. It's tight, but the engineer said it's certainly workable. Maybe even that wall probably would need to be redone anyways. I could look into another retaining wall grant, see if we have enough space there that we could even push it out, a couple more feet to improve those lanes. So yeah, the overall project has expanded. If I'm going to do the causeway, I'm going to do the causeway. That means all new lighting, all new poles, everything. So by putting it into this fund, it isn't just that project. If I don't spend all that money on that project, that carries over into the next big project, which could be Coventry Street. It just gives us more flexibility of money that's just sitting there and we can't touch it.
Okay. So what I'm looking at is there's been quite an expansion of scope in the Causeway project then, above and beyond what we initially thought was going to happen with it, is what I'm looking at. So I guess, I'd like to see that third lane. So if that money goes into the Causeway, the third lane has become a new part of the project. I can see that money being used in a manner other than what the initial engineering report was about. So I think you've sold me, okay?
Well, I think the reasoning why we chose to reword these funds, same with the Vista Fund, that's all I can use those funds for. So an overall project, it's tough when you have this money sitting there and you can't utilize it. So I hope that helped clearing that up a little bit.
Yeah, it does. But for me, when you go out to bid on something, there's an expectation that you'll meet those numbers. Mm-hmm. And the expectation shouldn't be that it's going to cost more.
Right. Well, part of that too is, once I get the engineer's design, how much of that can we do with the city forces? I'm hoping I can take and do 60% of that project ourselves. Of course, the traffic lights themselves, we're not going to be able to, but hopefully we can do all the groundwork. So by the time we get that, we'll have a better understanding of what the overall project's going to cost.
All right, thank you.
Tom,
you're welcome.
Tom, have you had any luck with the railroad? Because I know sometimes dealing with them can be rather difficult, because the last time I knew they were owned by some hedge fund.
Well, actually, it's CP Rail owns it now. It had been sold, and they bought it back. They've been actually very good. Previously, I wasn't able to get a hold of anybody. I've actually incorporated Lamoureux and Dickinson. They're actually working on that right now. They've been in contact with the Farmlows. At this point, we're going to file a permit to relocate it. But again, there's no estimate on what they may require us to do when we do relocate that. They may make us put in new updates to crossings, although I don't believe there's enough space there to do anything with arms and lights and that type of thing. But all that cost will have to be on the city's expense. So hopefully this winter we're going to finalize that, and we'll have a better understanding where we're at.
Great. Other questions on the capital? I mean, no, not capital. On the reassignment of the funds?
Mr. Mayor, this is Joseph Grisser, and I'm just curious is the document that the city manager was referring to something that's part of the package that was sent out with the agenda this morning, or is that a separate document that I have to wait for till it's posted?
We had it in that packet over the weekend.
It's online. Joe, if you go to the calendar, or if you go into our agendas, whichever one you choose on our website, it's there.
Other questions regarding this?
So just a comment from Melissa. I think it makes sense in the long term to create, the line of the fund of the street capital design, so that it is broader, so that every time there's a project that needs to be done, we don't have to create a separate line, item to fund for it. That we have one fund that's ongoing, that is designated for street capital design, so it can't be used for other types of projects. So it does restrict it in the sense, or limit its use to what it's intended for, but not to a specifically defined project. That makes sense to me.
And Laura, if I may ask, a lot of these recommendations came right from our auditor, correct?
When we go through that process, we have all the department heads in the room. We have the auditor. This year, the auditor was on the phone. We've got Jim Johnson, our treasurer, who's overseeing this, and we've got Becky, as you know, as our programs administrator and sort of the linchpin when it comes to finances. Everybody's in the room talking about this and trying to tie these recommendations into our existing plans and into our existing finance strategies and grants. So it's a very big conversation. This year took 3 conversations because we wanted to make sure that we were thinking for the long term and, dealing with COVID as well. And the reason I mention that is because part of the reason you have that 200,000 is the 250,000 in unassigned is because we stopped spending for a period of time as a direct result of COVID, when we furloughed staff and basically had to stop dealing with our daily life as we know it. So it was a very big conversation. Glad you asked.
Any other questions from any council member? Then, at this time, I would entertain a motion. I would entertain a motion to approve the audit reassignment.
Melissa, I would move to approve the audit reassignment.
A motion has been made. Is there a second?
This is Kevin Charbonneau. I'll second.
Made by Ms. Pedersen, seconded by Mr. Charbonneau. Any discussion on the motion? Then, all those in favor say aye.
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 The ayes have it. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Now, we'll move on to new business. I'll start with some new business. I just want to commend the rec committee and the rec department for the wonderful jack-o'-lantern project. I went by the other night when they were all lit up, and it was just beautiful. And then I took the time Saturday to actually walk over and look at the carvings up close, and there was some nicely carved pumpkins there. I certainly wouldn't have been able to do a job like that. I just want to give them kudos for that, for a job well done. I thought it was a great idea and a great project. And then the only other thing under new business, I believe the council received this letter. It was just from, I'm going to read it anyway for the public record. It says, "Dear Newport City Council, I would like to congratulate the City of Newport for all your efforts in making the city an attractive place to visit. I grew up in Newport, and although I now live in Morgan, I can honestly say that I am happily overwhelmed each time I visit my old hometown. The variety and placements of so many different kinds of flora, both summer and fall, have certainly made it very welcoming and attractive. I can say with certainty that my father, Melvin H. Carter, former mayor of Newport, would have been very proud to see all that you have done to beautify the city. In these difficult times, where it seems most people write letters of complaint, I couldn't let it go to recognize that there's good and beauty in the hearts of you City Council members. It shouldn't go unrecognized, and you should be congratulated for your efforts. In sincere appreciation, Janet Carter Selby. I thought that was just a nice letter that we received as members of the City Council. With that, I don't have any other new business. Mr. Ross, do you have any new business?
No new business.
Mr. Charbonneau?
No new business.
Ms. Pedersen?
No new business.
Mr. Wilson?
No new business.
Okay. Ms. Dogan?
No, thank you.
Does Mr. Johnson have anything?
No.
Nope. Okay. Then we'll move on to old business. I don't have any old business. Mr. Ross?
No old business.
Mr. Charbonneau?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay. Ms. Patterson?
No old business.
Okay. Mr. Wilson?
No old business.
No old business. Ms. Dogan?
No old business.
Mr. Johnson, have any old business?
Just that the number we're voting tomorrow, just for your information, I've had about 1,160 mail-in ballots come in. We'll be open. We're taking all the precautions necessary. Masks are required. Hand sanitizer. Everybody's going to be 6 feet apart, and we'll proceed as normal as possible in these abnormal times.
Okay. Thank you. And with that, the next City Council meeting will be a remote meeting to be held on November 16th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. And I will now need a motion to adjourn at 7:33.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Night.